Hello, and welcome to Friends for Life, a podcast of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's Life Ministry. We're sharing the stories and insights of real people living out God's love for the people He's created. We hope you'll stick around and be our friends for life. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host for this episode, Deaconess Dr. Tiffany Manor, and joining me in the studio here is Reverend Dr. Rick Mars. He's a seminary professor, a husband, a father. I'm sure you have other vocations and
grandfather
interests.
now.
Grandfather. So yeah. Oh, I'm a grandmother myself, so that's I always like to drop mention of that. And Dr. Mars has written a book that I think a lot of people here listening to Friends for Life may be interested in. It's titled Making Christian Counseling More Christ-Centered. So welcome. We usually use first names around here.
That's
welcome,
fine.
Rick. And introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your interests and things that you enjoy in life.
Yeah. Again, I've had a kind of a life that's been a number of different vocations. I started off, I grew up on a farm. I started off as a Christian counselor and psychologist in our Concordia University system schools, a couple of different ones, and then became a parish pastor for 6 years. Thought I was going to be a parish pastor for the rest of my life when the seminary called and said, would you come and teach pastoral counseling 17 years ago? And so I've been teaching pastoral counseling, licensed psychologist as well. Have all that sort of background, but mainly just like teaching people about when they have spiritual questions, theological, vertical questions about does God love them, that's where we need to point to Christ. And I've been active in the Christian counseling field. Oh, one other little side note. Yeah, you mentioned before we came online, I'm a stair climber. I climb tall buildings for, I won't call it fun, but for exercise and for racing, and actually ranked in the top 10 for men over the age of 60 for stair climb racing. So now I say that with full disclosure. There are fewer than 1,000 men in the United States my age or older that are willing to do this sport even once a year, let alone multiple sorts of. So that's top 10 out of a very small number of men. So
well, it still sounds fascinating. That's got to be good for your mental health and well-being to be active like that.
Yeah, no, I tell people I think stair climbing is the best cardio that I can do for my body because it's low impact. And my father had a heart attack when he was 67. My grandmother had a heart attack at age 67. I'm trying to avoid those sorts of things by taking good care of my body, which I think also does help take good care of our minds when we're taking care of our bodies. So it is something that I try to do. My wife and I walk a lot. We live near a park, and so we walk the park usually twice a day. So I try to get in more than 15,000 steps a day and then climb about 700 stories a week. So
700 stories. Whoa.
At least that's what my Fitbit says. So,
Wow. My husband is kind of the champion step person in our family. He regularly gets 15 to 20,000 steps a day. But I never thought about that and the number of stories and actual building, because you're climbing actual buildings, not just the paying attention to your watch or your Fitbit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I've been in the Christian counseling field for nearly 40 years now, and years and years ago, I realized that there weren't a lot of Lutherans that were speaking out in this field. There's a very large, several Christian counseling organizations in the United States. AACC is the largest, American Association for Christian Counselors, and it has over 50,000 members, but I would estimate that less than 1% of those are Lutherans. There just haven't been as many Lutherans go into this field as there have been Baptists and Presbyterians and Methodists and Pentecostals and so forth. A lot of other seminaries and Christian graduate schools have master's degrees in Christian counseling. And while a few of our Concordias have master's degrees in counseling, none of them are from a specific kind of Lutheran perspective, except a little bit Concordia, Wisconsin. The Wells and ELS have started a program out of Bethany College in Masters in Counseling, and so I'm glad that we're starting to get into it. But my book was sort of an attempt to be a Lutheran voice in this field of Christian counseling, because I think Luther's soul care theology has a lot to add to what other Christian counselors don't know and don't know how to do. because they don't hear it in their Baptist circles or in their Baptist sermons and so forth. So,
yeah, in my care of people throughout my service as a deaconess, that a really common question that I get is people recognizing it'd be beneficial to see a clinical provider, a therapist, a counselor. It's usually the language people use. I want to find a counselor.
right.
And, so often they would say, can you help me find a Lutheran counselor? And then recognize, oh, well, maybe it needs to be a Christian counselor. And that can be really challenging. I think that could be helpful for us to talk about. I mean, we also we also could provide this encouragement to any younger listeners that we may have, that if they really enjoy listening to people, walking with them when they're going through difficult times in life, that they might want to consider a career
right.
as a Lutheran Christian counselor, clinical provider, therapist. So that's certainly something that our church needs to take up and encourage young people into this, because there is a desire to see a Lutheran counselor. So for people who are listening, though, how do you find someone, a counselor who you're going to be able to believe that your faith will be listened to and understood, and really be brought to bear on whatever you're going through in life that's causing you to want to be in counseling? How do you find that person?
Well, I do tell people to start with their pastor and at least go and talk to him and say, has he vetted any Christian counselors in the area? Has he spent time kind of interviewing them, knowing what they think, what they believe, how they practice? Would he feel comfortable going to see that Christian counselor, or would he feel comfortable sending his wife or his daughter to that Christian counselor? And so if he can say yes to that sort of question, then you feel a little more comfortable about approaching that, even if the person that he's talking about might not be a Lutheran Christian, but if they're at least open to hearing, well, again, I encourage counselees to get a copy of my book and read through it and even lend it to a Christian counselor that they go see, because it's just got 5 or 6 chapters on Luther soul care theology that again, I've had 250 people at one time in an AACC conference come and hear me talk about these things. So Christian counselors are interested in Luther. They're just not always interested in Lutheran theology. But if you pose it, and as I have in the book, Luther said these sorts of things, they go, oh, well, I'd like to listen to Luther and what he says. And once I kind of explain some of that theology and even some techniques that flow out of it, they kind of, oh, I could use that in my practice. But they've not been exposed to it, even though they may have gotten a master's degree or a PhD even from some of the Christian counseling organizations, so or institutions. So start with that.
I love that. I mean, so take the book, and it's not just for Christian counselors to read. Any layperson? I've
had several lay people tell me that they really were benefited by reading it, and it helped make more sense to them and some of the problems that they were the spiritual problems they were struggling with. So, there's several nice lay people. What do you call them on Amazon? The endorsements from lay people. So it was very helpful for me to read Dr. Morris's book too. And I'm not a therapist and I'm not a pastor. I'm just a lay person that is going to see a counselor, and it was very helpful to me. So
lay people could read it, but then either take your copy or buy a copy for your counselor and say this will help you to understand
me, where I'm coming from, right?
And others perhaps that you're providing care to.
Yeah. That's at least my hope, and I hear it happening a little bit anyway. I just hope it keeps happening a little bit more. Yeah.
What are do you see the differences between the Christian counselors that are out there? That sometimes when my family has been seeking a counselor, we've gotten a list from our insurance company. These are the providers and network for you, and there's a bit of an alphabet soup behind their last names as to all kinds of acronyms, and I don't know what they mean, and I don't know how to choose from that. What kind of a person I should be reaching out to.
Right. Yeah, the field has added more and more acronyms. I don't even know all of them now. So it used to be licensed psychologists and professional counselors and professional social workers and marriage and family therapists, and now then each one of those have split up and had specialists in alcohol and drug abuse or family therapy or whatever. And so, yeah, there's lots and lots of names. You kind of just have to call them and talk to them and say, I'm looking for a counselor. What does this mean? What is your specialty? My problem is more along these lines. Do you see people that have those sorts of concerns, or would you suggest somebody else that you think specializes in this some more? Just like we go to, medical specialists, it's good to go to, even counseling specialists that have spent more time practicing in a certain area. And again, the downside to a lot of other Christian counselors is they don't understand proper distinction of law and gospel or theology of the cross. And so they sometimes approach counseling from, well, okay, you're a Christian who's struggling with anxiety or depression. Now, if you follow these 6 steps, you'll be a happier, healthier, less depressed, less anxious Christian. And they don't realize in retrospect that sometimes when they put 6 steps there, they're actually giving soft law. And then when somebody fails in their application of that soft law, then they feel more shame or more guilt. And so many Christian counselors still don't know what to do with shame and guilt, but we Lutherans do. We say, well, you forgive guilt, and you tell people that their shame has been covered over by the blood of Jesus Christ, and he took on the shame of the cross and conquered it even himself. You find those particular verses that match with their struggle, their Anfechtung, as Luther used to call it, and then use the gospel then to speak that word of promise directly to them, and let God's word, which does not return to him empty, Isaiah 55, let that word hopefully strengthen them in faith and not feel as anxious and depressed or whatever it might be for them.
I found that language of promise and then, even on the law side of things, requirement to be really helpful in my interactions with people who aren't Lutheran, who are Christians and not Lutheran, to help them understand, that I'm not just tossing off the proper distinction of law and gospel, and a phrase that means a lot to Lutherans, but that another Christian's not going to understand. So I could see how that could, almost be helpful for a Lutheran going into counseling to, in a sense, teach their counselor about, my pastor assures me of God's promises, and I find that very comforting. Are there other ways that a Lutheran Christian in a counseling setting could help their therapist understand what spiritually they need? I mean, is there ever an opportunity, I guess, for self-advocacy or the pastor's role in counseling?
Yeah. I do encourage pastors to at least think about maybe going to a first session with their parishioners when they meet a new counselor and see, introduce them. Don't stay for the entire session, but maybe get to see how the relationship is going in the first 10 minutes or so, and then exit. But then also the counselees can sign a waiver for the professional counselor, so that the counselor can interact with the pastor, and maybe they could meet once every 6 weeks or so, and especially if that pastor has like 3 or 4 parishioners that he's referred to one specific counselor, him sitting down and talking with that counselor for 30 minutes or an hour about those 3 or 4 people may give the counselor some very helpful insights into what the pastor sees in the larger community situation, but then also give the pastor some insights on how he can provide the spiritual care, the vertical issues care that the counselor might not be as well trained on. So in my book, I borrow from Baptist psychologist Eric Johnson that soul care is made up of a triangle of 3 different things: suffering, biopsychosocial damage, and sin. And so pastors are primarily dealing with the sin and suffering aspects of that triangle. professional counselors, be they Christians, are primarily doing with the suffering and the biopsychosocial damage, what's happened to us in our childhood or what we grew up genetically with that have led us to be, struggling with bipolar disorder or whatever it might be. The professional counselors are going to be more educated about the biopsychosocial damage, but how can the pastor and the counselor work together so that when sin and biopsychosocial damage are somehow going together, those two can work cohesively with one another? So,
I've heard some pastors describe that they might see people for a certain number of times about a circumstance of suffering that they're dealing with, and then they refer them on and or refer them off. And then I think there's an encouragement in what you're saying, that it's not that a pastor sees someone as an initial start of counseling and then a counselor finishes, but the pastor continues to provide care, that pastoral care to a congregation member and an individual alongside the counselor. I mean, right. You described even meeting the counselor or having some conversation, but maybe that's the only time that it's happening jointly, all three people in the same room. But can you talk more about that, about the need for pastoral care to continue while counseling is going on?
Yeah. No, I stress to students that once you do refer a parishioner on to a counselor, that doesn't mean you're done with that. You still have to go back and kind of check with them, just as you would somebody that you knew was struggling with cancer or long-term heart disease issues. You wouldn't just refer them to the medical doctor and say, "Okay, bye. I'm not going to pray with you anymore.
You don't need me anymore." No, that's not.
They still have spiritual issues that are going on. So just like bipolar disorder has physiological issues, it also has then some spiritual issues. Somebody that's struggling with cancer is going to have obviously physiological issues, but they're going to have spiritual questions of, why, Lord? Why are you letting this happen to me? The pastor, deaconesses should still be involved in that spiritual care of people. I just heard an interesting story you'd probably like from a student saying his RFE pastor, his resident field education pastor, a seminary student, had gone to make a hospital visit with some older woman, but he and the deaconess had gone together. And this older woman, when he asked her, "Well, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just doing fine, Pastor. Everything's going well. All these, they're taking really good care of me at the hospital." And then the pastor stepped out of the room to go check on somebody else or check with a nurse or something. And after he left the room, the woman started telling the deaconess how anxious she was, how scared she was about the upcoming procedure, all these sorts of negative emotions that she was not willing to share with her pastor, but she was willing to share with the deaconess. So again, just important to know that, sometimes pastors aren't going to hear all those things, but if they have a deaconess or a female counselor or whatever that they can walk alongside with, maybe that those women would open up to those women better.
I think that has lived out in my life and in my experience working with pastors. And, that's also a reminder that we have the body of Christ, that people serve one another in a variety of ways. All pastors are really valuable in proclaiming the forgiveness of sins individually to people. And yet there's other people who provide care too. And I think that is helpful when we think about counselors, because I know in situations where I've talked with people or, in my own family, where you might start seeing one counselor and realize, whoa, I'm not so certain if this is a productive relationship. I'm maybe not, getting as far as I would like to with this situation that I'm here to deal with. Can you talk about that, about, what happens with the first counselor that you interact with is just not quite the right fit?
I tell people quite often, go and see a counselor. If it doesn't feel like it's fitting after one or two sessions, then think about going someplace else. If you went to a dentist and didn't like the way the dentist and the dental hygienist were taking care of your teeth, well, you wouldn't stop going to a dentist. You'd find another dentist office to go to. So same thing kind of goes, and we never really know why we don't sometimes click with a particular counselor. I joke that, maybe that particular counselor just reminds you of your strange Uncle Joe, just some mannerisms or whatever that just don't click with you, and you might not even consciously be fully aware of that. But, counselors hope that they mesh with maybe 80% of the clients that come into their office. They know that they're not going to mesh with a 95 or 100%, but they hope they have the skills that 75, 80% of the people will want to come back for a second and third and fifth and 10th session as long as those sessions are needed.
So it's okay to say, this isn't me, it's not them, it's just maybe someone else would be helpful to talk to.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of questions and certainly stigma that comes up around counseling, and that this may be one aspect of it, of like, there must be, I guess, a failure in me if I can't work well with this particular counselor because they're an expert. But there should be no stigma or no shame in that. You just can work with somebody else instead. It doesn't mean that counseling is a failure.
Right.
It means try a different therapist.
Right. Now, again, you might, if you end up failing with 3 or 4 or 5 different counselors, it might be something else to kind of talk to your pastor or somebody about. But that usually doesn't happen. Usually somebody finds a counselor after 2 or 3 tries that they think they'll work with well.
Yeah. Any other stigmas around counseling that Lutherans, that Christians should engage in? I think it's getting better. This it used to be seen, and may still be seen by a number of people, that going to counseling is a last resort, or it's
sign of weakness.
Only the most desperate people need that, not me. I can pull myself up by my own bootstraps. I just need to pray more, or trust more, have more faith, or something like that. Those are all law. Speaking the law to ourselves.
That's not properly distinguishing law and gospel. And Walther even said that. So
we speak the law to ourselves really well, I find. But what else does the church need to understand about counseling and Christian counselors to help remove that stigma, or what can we do as Christians with one another to help encourage one another?
Good question. I mean, it is just one of those, I think, as people find out that their friends have gone to see a counselor, and that, if so-and-so went to see a counselor, then maybe it wasn't so bad. It just kind of slowly, as they hear about more people that are counselors that they know or trust at some level. It's like any vocation, that some people are going to like it. Some people don't like salesmen. They don't like lawyers for whatever reasons. But counseling is very, unique and particular to an individual. Just encouraging people to at least think about it, try it, see what it feels like after 2 or 3, 4. And again, so many people that I know, I didn't realize how helpful it was going to be just to talk, not to a friend, but to a professional that has some particular set of skills that I know is objective, so they're not giving me the bias that my cousin Alfred would give me if I went to talk to him. They're wanting to do something as professional as possible, and they get paid to do it, but they don't get paid a lot to do it. Professional counselors don't make tons and tons of money, not like medical doctors or others. But they do it because they like helping people, and they think they have a particular skill at it. And one other thing I wanted to make sure we did say, and now then actually there's a broader range of counselors post-COVID. A lot of people are seeing counselors online.
That telehealth, right?
Telehealth sort of thing. So if your pastor says, I haven't been able to find any Christian counselors within 20 miles of us that I really like and trust, well, go beyond 20 miles, because you can check out, you probably have to stay within your state because of state licensure laws and all those sorts of things. But you might find that there's a Christian counselor, 150 miles away from you that you maybe won't ever go and see face to face. Maybe you'd make the trip once, but mainly you would just see them online. And while I think there's a benefit to actually having in-person, face-to-face counseling, I think it's slightly more effective. I would rather have somebody find a good match that's 200 miles away that they're seeing online than a mismatch that they're seeing that happens to be 5 miles away. So I tend to say, and I don't say this with say empirical sort of evidence, but it just kind of feels to me like at least online counseling is 85% as effective as regular counseling or face-to-face counseling is. So think about you doing that. It's become much more commonly done. I know of one Lutheran pastor who's a Christian counselor in Ohio that he only sees people online. So he does not see anybody in a private office. It saves him money not having an office and saves him time going to the office. He said his clients, it saves them time because they don't have to drive to his office. He just sets the times that they meet online, and he thinks it's effective, and his clients think it's effective, and he's seeing people all over the state of Ohio. So, and again, there are Christian counselors, Lutheran counselors in some states, Lutheran Child and Family Services in some states, Iowa, Florida, other states that have a really, I think, highly trustworthy Lutheran Christian counseling organizations. I like to tell people about the Wisconsin Synod Christian Family Solutions people, which have 110 Christian counselors. They're like 85 of them are up in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so they're not spread across the United States as widely. But if you live in Wisconsin and Minnesota, those are some really good options to consider face-to-face with, because they have offices in a wide variety of geographic areas in those two states. So yeah, there are Lutherans that are out there doing it. There's just not as widespread across the United States as what I wish we were.
Yeah, I often encourage people to check out the LCMS Recognized Service Organization directory. You can, it's on the website actually on online lcms.org, and then /RSO, and you can just put in the searchable directory counseling, and it'll come up with all of the at least registered organizations that recognize to be in step with the LCMS with doctrine and practice. But there are certainly other resources, and nice to have the options to whether it's the online option. So many employers provide employee assistance programs where maybe there's an immediate telephone option if you can call 24 hours a day, no matter where you're from, where you are. So that can be a nice option as well, particularly if there's something critical and really timely for you. I encourage people to have ongoing relationships with counselors. Maybe you don't need to see them on a weekly or even monthly basis, but what about like going to the dentist? You go once, twice a year to check in, and that way if you need something, you've got someone that you can call if your teeth start hurting. I think that can be very similar to a relationship that you have with a therapist. If you move someplace and you do some checking and find someone before it gets to be a critical situation, and you've got a relationship and you're established, and then you can call them up, and if you need to go for a month or two on a more regular basis, but considering emotional, mental well visit a couple times a year, I think is a really good idea, and perhaps we're getting to be more open to that than say in past decades.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you talking through Christian counseling with me today, and certainly a big thanks to our listeners for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review, and don't forget to click the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. New episodes drop twice each month.
Did you want to plug that?
Speaking of episodes, we've got the Lutheran Witness has a recent release that is focused on mental health for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. There's some great articles in that. I think you authored one of them.
Yep, on the topic we're talking about today, actually, referrals. So, but yeah, some very good articles. Dr. Stephen Saunders, Todd Peppercorn, others just had some really good articles in there.
Yeah, so you can find that on lcms.org as well, the Lutheran Witness. focus on mental health. And the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is coming out with a whole host of new resources on mental health. So stay tuned and watch for those. And as you're looking for more information about Friends for Life, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as Friends for Life LCMS. And finally, listeners, we want to hear from you. If you have an idea about a guest you'd like to hear from or a topic you want to talk about, email us at friendsforlife@lcms.org. We want to hear from you about what you want to hear about when it comes to issues of life. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Dr. Mars.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany.
Thanks for joining us. Friends for Life is a podcast that introduces listeners to life issues by introducing them to friends who stand for life.